Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. It's so nice to see people in person at conferences again. It's been a long time being at home and not being able to attend these kind of conferences. So today we're going to talk about management. So spoiler alert, this is not going to be the most technical talk. So if this is what you're expecting, I'm sorry to disappoint you. But I will use Scala as examples to prove some of the points I'm trying to make. So first off, let me start by introducing myself. So my name is Maria. I've been a Scala developer for about 7 years before I decided to transition into management. A transition that happened less than a year ago. So about 9 months ago, I decided to make this change. I've been employed with Expedia for the last 3 years and a bit. And if you don't know what Expedia is, we are a travel company. So we provide hotels and flights and cruises to our customers, whatever they want to make their holiday good. And maybe some of you have traveled here to Seattle today with us. And if you did, I hope you have had a good experience. So I thought in true Expedia fashion, I'll introduce myself through the places that I visited. So that's a map of the countries I've seen so far. There's about 25 of them. And I'm hoping to expand a bit more outside Europe. The line you see on the map is where I came from. I am based in London, in the Expedia office in London. And that also represents how jet lagged I am right now. So please bear with me. If you want to connect at my Twitter handle, feel free to message me about any questions you might have. Cool. So let us get started. I'll tell you a little story today about how I ended up in this situation. Now, am I the most qualified person to talk about management? Well, definitely not. I'm very new to this. I'm not going to pretend that is me. But there's been so many people that reached out to me ever since I made this change to ask me about why I decided to do it, how has it been so far, and just asking for general advice, that I thought it would be quite good to go out to a wider audience and share my experience so far. So today we'll be exploring a few topics from what management is, why should you care about it, especially as a Scala developer, when should you consider this as a next step in your career? And also what do you expect once you get started and what are some of the challenges that I faced? Cool. So did you ever wonder what does an engineering manager even do all day? Because as far as I'm concerned, it just seems like they're running around from meeting to meeting. They're never at their desk. Whenever you try to, someone's nodding, so you know what I'm talking about. Whenever you're trying to set a call with them or any kind of meeting, they never have space in the calendar either. So what do? So hopefully every meeting that you have as a manager is there for a good reason. And I think that reason should be to help you understand what is going on inside your team and outside your team as well. And this fits into some of the main responsibilities you will have as an engineering manager. And these are not all of them that I'm going through. We don't have time for that, but I'll just highlight a few of them. So first of all, you'll need to be aware of the strengths and dynamics within your team. This will basically help you visualize better how the distribution of work will work inside your team. And I don't mean that in a very micromanaging kind of way, but more in a way when a feature is proposed, let's say, to your team, can you immediately identify if the team has the knowledge to do it or the capacity to do it? So let's say someone comes to you and they want your team to implement this job that runs, let's say, every day, reads data from some tables, aggregates the data, writes everything to some Kafka topic. Now you should be able to immediately ask yourself, does my team have the knowledge to implement this? Do they know maybe Spark could come in handy here? Do they know any streaming libraries that might help with the Kafka part? If the answer is no to all of these questions, then you probably have a knowledge gap that you need to fill in. And you might do that in different ways. You could set up time for them to sort of study on their own about these topics. You could try to get help from the outside, whether it's inside your team, inside your company. So maybe talk to a team that has done this recently and try to get their help, or maybe even external help as well. Now, if the answer to these questions is maybe one of the people in your team does have the knowledge, you're probably in a bit of a better position. They can take the lead on that work, but make sure they do spread the knowledge once you get started. So basically what you're trying to achieve, you want to give your team the tools to work better together and as a team than alone as individual people. And another responsibility you'll have as an engineering manager is to be able to explain to your team what success looks like. You'll be in endless discussions with your product team, with your stakeholders, trying to understand what's next for your projects. And you should be able to go in front of your team and explain that to them and get them motivated about it and excited as well. But let's not kid ourselves. Like, not all work that comes to your team is going to be exciting. There's always the routine work that has to be done that no one ever wants to touch. In that case, can you think of ways to maybe bring in team goals into this unglamorous piece of work that's coming your way? So maybe your team really wants to start taking the steps to move to Scala 3, but they've had this library that's been blocking them for a long time. As part of this piece of work, can you see a way for them to move away from that library so you don't block this moving forwards? This could really provide the boost that your team needs to be excited about what's coming next. And lastly, I think as an engineering manager, you have the responsibility to create a healthy culture within your team. A successful team has no bullies that brings the other people down, right? And one way to identify this kind of people is by observing how your team interacts when that person is around and when they're not around, right? Collaboration and open communication is only possible if everyone feels safe in the team and there is trust in the team as well. So as an engineering manager, you'll have to deal with these situations, understand what motivates people to act a certain way, and take action. Now, on the other hand, I think management shouldn't be confused with a few other things. So management is definitely not about bossing people around. You are not there to be the almighty leader of the team. And no matter how diplomatic you think you are sometimes expressing some of these thoughts, the team will pick up on it. And I would say when it comes to management, listening is just as important of a skill as coding, for example. Also, management is not a promotion. I know it might seem like it is, but once you get started, I think it will become obvious why it's not. You've just moved into a different track with a different set of skills. And it will take a while to understand how dynamics work and how to be effective in your role. You've just traded the familiarity of coding with the unknown of working with people. And lastly, I think management is not only for extroverted people. I'm definitely not one of them. I do struggle sometimes in bigger meetings to find energy to speak up. And I do need time for myself to recharge and really reflect on what happened and make the best decisions. But I will say, even if you're not extroverted, you do have to like talking to people. I have days where I get into the office and the first 3 to 4 hours is just nonstop talking and meetings. And I don't mean like I'm just doing chit-chat with the team. We actually have loads of work to do. And my goal should be to see if there's any blockers, if I can help the team in any way. So to keep that in mind. Right, so at this point, you might be a bit confused and think, well, this is a Scala conference. Why am I even talking about management to you all? But I want to show you how important it is for you as a Scala developer to consider management, right? After coding in Scala for 7 years, it was very difficult for me to adjust to management. So I'll share a little bit with you kind of what my experience was when I got started and how Scala felt from the other side as well. I think this kind of transition happened in 3 phases for me. So when I started, I kind of found myself leaning towards the coding tasks instead of my management tasks because this was what I knew how to do best, right? Coding is just kind of put your headphones on, pick up a ticket, and just go with it. Because everything you need to know is right there in front of you. So that worked for a while. But then a couple of weeks down the line, I realized because of my management responsibilities, I cannot pick up any ticket I want from the backlog because there's a danger I will block the team. Because tickets that would initially take me about a day to complete, I would now get done in about a week because of my very fragmented time throughout the day. So what I did next, I started picking up things that I knew maybe the team wanted to explore, but they never had time to, and do that instead. Which made it kind of exciting, to be honest, because I got to play with certain libraries that I never had the opportunity to play with. But even that, I found like it didn't work very well with my time commitments. And what happened in the end, I found myself doing more kind of investigation work than actually coding work. And this worked fine for me. So what happens now is if a support request comes through, for example, I will be the first person to pick it up, see if there's something I can do that doesn't require coding. And if there is a problem that needs to be solved, someone else will probably implement it, not me. But just because I don't really write Scala actively anymore, I don't think my Scala knowledge is wasted. And I'll tell you a bit about why I think that is. So first of all, as a manager, you will be responsible for helping people achieve their goals and setting goals that they really, really care about. And you're a technical person and you understand what that means. And I have an example for you. About 3 years ago, when I got started with Expedia, my manager at the time, who was a former Scala developer himself, he suggested I set as one of my goals to learn about FS2 and try to implement it in one of our projects. And that was one of the most exciting things I've done. It was finally a goal I could get on board with. So by the end of the quarter, I did manage to implement that and implemented it in one of our microservices, presented to the team, and I managed to replace a very complicated piece of code that was using Akka streams, and it wasn't very nicely integrated with our project. After I managed to do so, I shared my knowledge with the team and everyone was on board. So we then proceeded to move all of our apps to use FS2, which I think it was a win-win for everyone. Next up, I think you as a manager will have time and to give people the space to learn, right? And this is often overlooked, I think, because it's very tempting to kind of just focus on delivery and pick up the tickets that are very high visibility. But I think things in the Scala world are changing. And with Scala 3 just around the corner, well, not really, it's been around for a while, but most teams, like my team, they didn't have time to explore it. So I do want to create those spaces for my team as well. And I have a belief that people shouldn't be expected to do this kind of learning time in their free time. I think this should be part of their work days. And if you are the kind of person that loves doing this after work and they have side projects, that's completely fine and that's great. But I think there's loads of people as well in teams that have kids, have other responsibilities, and they don't have the time to do so. So I want to create this environment in my team where everyone has space to learn so that we all start from the same level. Next, I think you as a manager, you will have the responsibility to introduce new people to Scala. And in the last few months, I had the opportunity of onboarding people at different levels as well. So from interns to grads, to experienced developers who have used Scala before, and experienced developers who've never used Scala before. And the experience they have when they enter your team could make it or break it for them. So have a look around and see if there's anything you can improve in this onboarding process. Do you have all the tools that they need to be productive straight away? If it takes them like more than a week to kind of set up the development environment and be productive, then maybe there's ways where you can contribute to improve that for the next person that joins. Next up, and very similarly, you'll be responsible for hiring. And I have another story time for you here. So at Expedia, we don't use Scala as our main language of choice. We have a few teams in London and a few teams around the world that do Scala, but our main language is Kotlin. And some of the older services we have, they're in Java. Now, when candidates apply to us and they go through our interviewing process, we tell them they can use any JVM language they use. And we also send them these templates that contain a very simple main with a very dummy test where they can just fill in the solution. When I got started with hiring, I noticed that we were only sending templates for Java and Kotlin, but one for Scala didn't exist. And I thought that was unfair for the candidates that were Scala developers. And even if they could do that part themselves, it was just extra time that they had to manage. So I think that is just a little thing I could improve. And I did so because I had the knowledge to do it. And it only took me about 30 minutes to have such a big impact for our candidates. And finally, I want to reiterate on something that I did mention before as well. As a manager, you do have the responsibility to create a healthy culture in your team. And the reason why I think that is important is because the culture you have in your team, it will eventually trickle down into the Scala community. People in your team are going to be the people who attend these conferences. They're going to be the people who speak at conferences as well or at meetups. They're going to be the people that contribute to open source and so on. I find that Scala as a language can be quite intimidating for beginners, and it might take quite a long time to feel like you're productive. And when you get started, you have to climb hill after hill to make it to kind of a good level where you feel confident enough to share your opinions and so on. But once you've reached a certain level, I say you have to be careful and not to get this feeling of, just because I know what a monad is, it doesn't mean like I'm better than everyone else, right? So one thing that you're responsible of, I think, as a manager, you have to teach your team how to be humble and how to, instead of showing off what they know, just teach the other what they know. And I have another little example which happened very recently in my team. So I've been thinking for the last few weeks about how to introduce a very kind of formalized version of learning time in the team, right? I wanted to make sure everyone feels safe to join in. So I went on and I set up chats with everyone in the team and asked them about their opinion on this, any challenges that they're facing, or any suggestions they might have. And one of the common challenges that people raised with me was that they were worried that if they are seen on working on non-product related work, then it might impact negatively on their performance or on their feedback at the end of the quarter, right? And one of the suggestions I received from one of my colleagues was it might help if you would join in these sessions as well. And I thought that was such a good example of leading by example, right? Because if they see me being at the beginning of the day, saying, hey, folks, I'm just going to spend this afternoon learning about this particular thing, then people will feel more comfortable to join in as well. Now, this is kind of where we enter the one-to-one part of my talk, because there comes a point in everyone's career where your manager is going to ask you, have you considered the management track? Is this something you're interested in? For me, it happened about 5 years ago, which in retrospect was very early on in my career. I was definitely not ready. And at the time, I remember kind of almost laughing in my manager's face and thinking, no, I would never go down this path. I'm happy with what I do. But things do change. And I had to think about it. And in my about 8 years of career, I had 10 managers, which is quite a lot. And out of all those 10 managers, about 70 to 80% of them came from a technical background, and only about 20% were women. What I noticed in this time was when the managers were disengaged or they didn't really contribute to the team much, I realized that the people in the team would find different ways to cope with it. And that was usually by creating this kind of support system where they would vent to each other. And I know this was happening because I was part of that as well. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you're very lucky. Now, I'm not saying if you have a very good manager, people won't talk. That will happen no matter what you do. But ideally, what you want is for people to come to you with their problems as well, because they trust you can help with them. Now, when these things were happening, I noticed that the junior developers were impacted the most because they needed the most support from managers. I noticed that trust in leadership was dropping and motivation was dropping as well. So I remember looking around me and very, very foolishly thinking, well, I can do better than this. I can definitely fix things. Obviously, it took it took a few years for me to take any action towards this, but the seed was planted. So when I received this opportunity of moving into management, I took it. And if you're thinking to do the same thing, then I just want to share with you a few traits that I think you should have to be successful in your role. So first off, I think it's important to mention you have to be comfortable with giving feedback. You will, throughout your work, have to talk to a lot of people, collect feedback, and give it to your reports. Now, giving positive feedback, it's easy. Everyone can do that. But when things don't go according to plan, you have to be able to have those difficult conversations. There's a lot of resources about how to give good feedback out there, so I won't go into too much detail, but my feedback is make sure you collect feedback often from your reports. It doesn't have to be written down. It can be just a verbal feedback as well, so you don't take too much of their time. And also, make sure you time it right. So let's say you have some constructive criticism you want to give to one of your reports. Just make sure you give it as soon as you can, and don't wait till the end of the quarter or the end of the year to give it, because by then it might be too late for them to address it, right? And very, very similarly, I think you have to be comfortable with receiving feedback. Feedback is a two-way street, and it kind of only works if you assume positive intent. I would say you have to encourage your reports to give you feedback often, because this is the only way you can be more effective and help them better, and you will be able to grow as a manager as well. At the end of the day, if you notice your reports give you critical feedback, I think that is a good thing, because it means that they trust you enough to share this kind of feedback with you without any kind of fear of retaliation from you. Now, my next point is you have to be comfortable with apologizing. People make mistakes all the time, and you will be part of it. People will come to you all the time for advice and for your support, and sometimes you will get things right, or sometimes you will make mistakes. That's completely fine. Admitting when you're wrong, it just makes you human. It doesn't make you a bad manager. So keep that in mind. The more honest you are with your team, the more they will trust you in the long run. And finally, I think it's important to note that when things do go down, you must be able to remain calm. Now, most of you here are probably developers, and you do know not all releases go smoothly, not all bugs are solved in 10 minutes. So when things do go down, it's very important for you to try not to hover around your team and remind them every 5 minutes of the impact of the issue. They already know the impact. They don't need to do that for that. If you want to help, you can sit down with them, try to find a good rollback strategy. You can communicate to the stakeholders if that's the case, that something went wrong. But try to be useful. Don't point fingers, and don't raise your voice in any way. Don't be impatient. I think at the end of the day, it's not important who made the mistake. It's important that we can fix it as a team and everyone can learn something from it. Right, so let's move on and talk a little bit about when would it be a good moment for you to consider management. I would say you have this feeling that you've probably tried all the Scala or all the tech that you wanted. And this is actually something I was actually asked when I first expressed interest in management. My director at the time asked me this, and I thought, well, how am I supposed to know? There's always so much more to learn. But the more I worked with Scala and with coding, the more I kind of started getting this feeling that I am more interested about the big picture than I am about fighting with another dependency hell. So yeah, that's a good indication. Another one would be you're excited about shaping the outcome of projects and just the course of projects in general as well. Because as a manager, you will get to influence what comes to your team, and you will have to make sure what you pick up is going to align with business goals as well. So have a think if this is something that motivates you at all. And another thing would be you realize that you like working with people, and you are motivated by helping them grow as people. So leading a team and helping them make an impact should be something that appeals to you. If all of these things sound horrible to you and you think you could never do something like that, I do have a couple of alternatives for you. Just in case you are thinking about making some change in your career, but you're not ready to take on the full management responsibility. So one of it, maybe talk to your manager if there are any tech lead opportunities in your team. I know not every team has this, and kind of the definition of what it means varies a little bit from team to team as well. But your manager should be able to provide you some idea on what's available. It is not management, but it will give you more responsibilities and more of a big, wider picture of what is going on. And also another option, it is related more to management. I would say ask if a hands-on engineering manager role is available. So instead of taking on a full team, you may be taking on 2 to 3 people, just manage them, and the rest of the time do the coding as usual. Now, I will say this one is a bit of a slippery slope. It's very easy to fall into the bucket of just being in meetings all the time. So careful with that. You have to be very organized to get it to work. And finally, I want to talk about a few challenges that I encountered when I got started, and just suggest a few things how you could make it a little bit better. So first off, the most intimidating thing for me when I got started was to make decisions by myself. Unfortunately, when I started, some organizational changes were happening at the same time. So very early on, I had to make decisions about team structures and ways of working. And it was incredibly intimidating because I felt like yesterday I was one of these people. How can I make changes now by myself? How can I make these decisions? So ideally, you should have your manager and a support group with you all the time to help you through these things. But I would also encourage you to go get a mentor, find someone maybe in your company who's been through something similar recently, or just reach out outside of the company as well. Maybe you need more of an objective piece of advice. Another thing that really surprised me was how much people needed me. And at the beginning, I was a bit worried that I wasn't doing things right. Maybe I wasn't communicating clearly what was going on. But with time, I realized it was actually because people valued my opinion and they wanted me to contribute to their work and try to give them my best advice. Now, of course, you shouldn't expect people needing you at the same levels. Some people will have more questions, some people won't. But generally, you need to keep the conversations going with everyone. So do make sure you have regular one-to-ones. Make sure you understand what timings work for your team. Make sure the frequency works for everyone and the day of the week and so on. Because this will give you the opportunity to give updates and for your team to share with you any blockers you might have. Next thing I wanted to bring up is once you switch to management, your focus will be all over the place. You will have a million distractions throughout the day, from meetings with stakeholders, with the product team, one-to-ones with your team, hiring, giving status updates, and so on. There's a lot on your plate all the time. So if you want to be more efficient, I would say you have to stay very organized. Your calendar will be your best friend. So make sure you use it. I would suggest every time you want some focus time, just put it down in your calendar. It will help you a lot. And also another tip, just write everything down. I thought I could remember things. Spoiler alert, I cannot remember anything. So I have this ever-growing list of things I need to do all the time, and that helps a lot. And another thing is you will realize you have less time for learning tech. And not only that, but less time to understand how the team has built your project as well. And you have to spend active time to try to understand these things. When it comes to learning tech, I would say maybe join some of the tech meetings your team has, try to learn from them a little bit. When I became a manager in the same team where I used to code before, so I was very, very familiar with the code base. And that gave me extra confidence to make certain decisions. But as time went on, I felt like I was kind of falling apart from that, and I just felt like some of the newer features I wasn't that familiar with. So I do like once in a while to sit down and try to go through it and try to get that knowledge back, because at the end of the day, that will give me the confidence to go to my product team or and just kind of decide if something is even possible or how long it would take to get it done. And lastly, I had to understand very early on that individual wins were a thing of the past, and you have to make sure you're all right with this. But this shouldn't take, This shouldn't take away from the excitement of delivering something with your team. You might have been the one who wrote the code, but you were there for your team to answer any questions, to unblock them, to shield them from any external distractions they might have had. So you were there for them. And it is your responsibility at the end of the day to go and share the good work that they've done with everyone in the company. So it is a happy occasion. I would say when something is done, make sure you give everyone the recognition they deserve, and make sure you celebrate often. That's always a nice thing to do with your team. So this gives us the end of the talk, and I want to share before I go a few resources with you to help you get started if this is something that you have in your mind. There's so many good resources out there and so many good books. I want to mention The Making of a Manager. So this is a step-by-step guide into management, from getting started to how to deal with feedback, to how to manage different sizes of teams and so on. It's one of those books I like having on my desk at all times and just refer back to it once in a while. The second one is the Manager's Path. So this is more of a high-level overview of management. And I do recommend reading this one, even if you don't want to switch to this track, because it teaches you a bit about how to interact with managers at different levels as well. Now, my next suggestion is going to be very unconventional, which is just read any books, even if it's fiction, right? Because at the end of the day, management is about people. And you will interact with people from different backgrounds and different cultures and different stories, really. And what better way to learn about human nature than through literary fiction? And finally, the most obvious suggestion, just connect with people. You're at the conference, you have so many talented people around you. Just reach out and ask for their opinion and try to create those connections. And before I go, I want to say management is a journey, and this has just been my experience so far. And I'll probably look back to this talk in a couple of years' time and think, oh, that was such a dummy. I had so much to learn. But I just wanted to give you kind of a taste of how it feels like and what it means for Scala. You'll have the responsibility to motivate the next generation and to give them the tools to implement healthy engineering principles as well. Now, management can be scary and can be complicated, and it's so frustrating at times. But it can be also very rewarding if you do it for the right reasons. And with that, I will conclude my talk. Thank you so much for listening to me, and enjoy the rest of your conference.